So 25 years ago, I was living in Washington, D.C. before I moved back to Baltimore, and a friend of mine by the name of Duncan Primo, who some of you may know, he's a poet and at that time a recent graduate from an MFA program. He applied for a job at the Native American Indian Museum, and I swear I'm getting this into an introduction. So he goes to this interview, and I talked to him later that night, and I asked him how this interview went for this job he really wants, and he says, "You're not gonna believe what happened. I go into the museum, and I go to this guy's office who's gonna interview me, and I sit down, and I look at the bookshelf, and there's poetry books, contemporary poetry books on the shelf, and he's thinking, this is unbelievable good luck, like, I'm gonna get this job." So he starts talking with this person interviewing him, and it was actually a collection of the best American poetry on the bookshelf. And this gentleman says to Duncan, "I'm actually in that anthology, and I'm a published poet." And so we can't believe Duncan's good luck. And I asked Duncan eventually, "Well, how did the interview for the job go?" And Duncan's like, "Well, that didn't go very well." Which, if you know Duncan, that's probably true. So anyways, the person interviewing Duncan, who then offered him the job and worked with him for 1 year, is none other than Terence Winch. And so that's how 25 years ago I found out who Terence Winch was. And we've been very good friends ever since. Shortly after that, we were spending nights running around DC together, going to shows and exhibitions and readings. And Terence has been a wonderful friend to me all these years. And as people who know Terence, which I know several of you do, you're not going to find this surprising when I tell you that Terence has been one of the biggest supporters of my work, whether it's art or Smartish Pace, of anyone that I've met. Whether he introduced me to so many of his friends and poets in the years, especially back in DC, whether it was Eamon Grennan or Liam Rector or Karen Ciatris, people that were really influential and helpful to the magazine, especially in the early days. It was really invaluable. And Terence would never miss an opportunity taking me out when he had everyone's attention to tell them how great Smartish Pace was. Even though it wasn't true, he would say wonderful lies about the magazine and people believed it, and then it sort of started to happen. So Terence, I just want to say thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I know it's cliche, but you genuinely are one of a kind. I've never met anyone like you, man. I love you. So Terence Winch is the author of 10 books of poems. Most recently, it is As If Desire from Hanging Loose Press. Also, That Ship Has Sailed from the Pitt Poetry Series. He is the author of 2 story collections and a novel. Winner of an American Book Award, the Columbia Book Award, along with an NEA Poetry Fellowship and the Gertrude Stein Award for Innovative Writing. Terence has had his work featured in more than 50 anthologies. As many of you know, he is also a musician and songwriter. He co-founded Celtic Thunder, the traditional Irish music group, and composed their best-known song, When New York Was Irish. Of course, Terence is the guest editor of this last edition of the Best American Poetry, and it is my pleasure to welcome one of my favorite poets, Terence Winch.
Wow, Stephen, thank you. That was a great introduction. Well, I thought the interview with Duncan went pretty well. But he didn't really have a good editorial sensibility. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to Bird in Hand. I'm really looking forward to this because I only personally know about half the poets reading today. So I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. Just to give you an overview of this series, it was started in 1988 by David Lehman, poet, scholar, critic, man of letters. And he set up the sort of format and template for this right at the start. And I think that was part of the success of this anthology over the years, because what he did was limit it to 75 poems and have each poet poet write something about the poem that was chosen. And I think that's something that people really look for, because those little write-ups can really help you find your way into the poem more successfully. And he's, every year there's a new guest editor, and that guest editor has the full authority to choose the poems. And there's been a lot of controversy around the whole title, Best American Poetry, because it's a very subjective process. It's one person reading as many poems as they humanly can in about a 12-month period, and selecting based on their own subjective criteria. So it's very imperfect, and I address some of these things in the introduction to the book. But I did feel when I agreed to do this, and David asked me to do it, I had a lot of misgivings, but I did jump into it. And all of a sudden I found myself inundated with scores of journals and magazines, print, online, etc. And I would just read and read and read, and select poems that I would later maybe deselect. And the process went on for a long time. And ultimately I felt very happy with the 75 poems that resulted. Although I was looking through Nicholson Baker's fabulous 2009 novel, The Anthologist, while I was working on the book. I had read the novel when it came out, but I was looking through it, and one line caught me by the narrator. He says, he's the anthologist of the time. He says, if we could just stop for 1 year, if everybody could just stop publishing their poems. No more, stop it. Just everyone, every poet, just stop. And when I read that, I thought, yeah, I'm on board with that. but actually, I really got into it, and I did feel, as anyone would, I think, in that situation, quoting Pope Francis, who am I to judge? And I thought that was an excellent question by him, and I applied it to myself. But I had agreed to do it, so I thought, okay, I'm just going to do the best job I can. And I think if you get the book and read it, you'll find that it's a great experience. There's a lot of wonderful work in there. So what I'm going to do is read 2 poems from the anthology, and then one of mine from the previous anthology. And the first thing I'm going to read is, appropriately enough, a poem about Baltimore by David Boderman, who couldn't be here because he's recovering from surgery. And this is a poem called Annunciation. Annunciation. For my sins, I live in the city of Baltimore, immutable as it staggers into the sea, its crooked shore uncertain of any harbor, impure and beautiful, like a cigarette butt in last night's drink. So must I also think like Poe, with an aching head of dark and transcendent things that drift from those alleys, follow us back to our little blue home. Let these poems be our fiery word in these haunted streets, turning all shades, but our own, to things as real as stone, where we can read our death has not been written yet. Even with monsters at the edges, it is a map where we can live. This city they keep building as it falls. The water's current carries everything away, but what we feel, who we loved, who we went that night for crabs and beer. It will never be more real than here. And I'm going to read a poem by Michael Lally, who is my closest friend and who was a real catalyst in DC in the 70s, helped start the mass transit readings that a lot of people I know in this area kind of came out of as writers. which is 450 autobiographical sonnets that only covers 10 years. And he's got, hundreds more. So this is a sequence of 3 connected sonnets called DC 1972. And this recounts Michael's first forays into the gay world. His best known title probably to this day is the South Orange Sonnets, which is a chapbook of 20 poems. And if you get a chance to read it, it's wonderful. Anyway, DC 1972. 1. Every day seems to set a precedent for me. The first rough trade bar I go to, a term I didn't even know only months ago, is like a parody of a tough straight bar. Only the Johns treat the so-called ladies with what I take as more sincerity. The transsexuals and transvestites and visiting servicemen from the bus station next door are far from liberated in the way gay revolutionaries use that term, but I'm surprised at how comfortable I feel around them all. I'm with Ted, who, in his pursuit of his black identity, is discovering more and more married fathers among the black men he's seeing on the down level. 2. The first night I go to the grill with Ed, I feel like a star just walking through the door, as the entire room turns to look and obviously likes what they see. I feel like a spy as well, inside a world few people know. The bar's on Wisconsin in the heart of Georgetown, and I've passed it many times, thinking nothing of it, as I'm sure most straight people do. But inside are mostly men who this night are singing along to American Pie while waggling their fingers, creating an atmosphere only a straight man couldn't appreciate for its mixture of innocence and hope in the face of such an obviously hostile world and sometimes desperate lifestyle. 3. I initiate a conversation with a man for the first time in a gay bar, a broad-faced, friendly-looking guy with a beautiful smile, part African-American, part Island-American, part everything, eventually asking if he wants to go outside to find some quiet. After walking around a while, I get up the nerve to ask if he'd like to go back to my place. Lee's up when we get there. She's been asking why I never bring any of my gay male friends home with me, but I still feel guilty. In my bedroom, I try to be quiet, which is a disappointment because I've learned from male lovers that sex doesn't have to be serious or even continuous, but a mixture of sensuality, talk, laughter, and even shouting and carrying on. So, staying with the sex theme, I'm going to read a poem of mine from the 2006 anthology chosen by Billy Collins called Sex Elegy. My lovers have vanished. I used to have many. One moved to Boston and married a Japanese photographer. Another became a famous actress. Another one, who for a long time I mistakenly believed to be dead, now lives in Manhattan. We used to know each other so intimately, sucking and munching on each other, inserting, penetrating, exploding, becoming as one. Funky smell of sweaty bodies, clothes strewn on floor and bed, candles burning, smoke of cigarettes and joints curling up the bedroom atmosphere. Now we never touch, barely talk. Some I have lost all contact with. But memories of our pleasure together, my dears, still play in my mind. My body can still feel your touch. My tongue still remembers your taste. Everything else I seem to have forgotten. The present is the life insurance premium automatically deducted from your paycheck, while the past burns out of control in a vacant lot on the outskirts of town.